All right, so today's use of force review comes out of Boise, Idaho, and this was an officer-involved shooting that occurred on June 24th, 2023, at approximately 1 in the morning, which fell on a Saturday. And this would have occurred near 5th Street and Idaho Street in downtown Boise. The involved officer is Chance Feldner, or Felder, depending on the news source. He has served with the Boise Police Department for nearly a decade. In addition to his service, during the time of this incident, he was with other Boise officers who were working on a Boise Police Department gang team. They were investigating a suspect at the time of this incident. In this incident, the suspect, Peyton Wasson, was armed with a black semi-automatic handgun, later determined to be a Glock. The handgun was noted to be in his waistband. However, while fleeing from the officer, he removed the Glock from his waistband prior to the officer-involved shooting. All right, so this incident originated, like I said, the officers were conducting a gang team patrol. Some departments call them gang units, gang suppression. It just says in the press release by the district attorney's office, Boise Police Department gang team. The BPD gang team was investigating a parolee for drug trafficking who was named Mario Garza. Garza was observed with a handgun in his possession, and, well, being on parole, he is prohibited from possession of any firearm. He was also observed with a white male, whose identity was unknown at the time, who would turn out to be this Peyton Wasson. Both Wasson and Garza were observed by the gang team to be wearing what was described as gang attire when they were noticed. They had arrived to the area in a black Kia Forte, which was registered to Mr. Garza. Also, it should be noted they walked into a bar off of 6th Street and Main Street. The bar was called the Dirty Little Roddies. Also, in addition to this, they also were with a white adult female named Jordan R. Smith. While they are inside of the bar, a Boise Police Department officer walking by Garza's black Kia Forte did observe a Glock handgun in plain view within the vehicle. And that's probable cause. And being that Garza is on parole, he shouldn't have possession of that weapon. So the BPD officer then communicated with an on-duty probation and parole officer about the incident, and they requested that the Boise Police Department will do a detain and search on Garza. So at this time, the officers begin a plan on how they're going to make contact with Garza and to detain and search him because they now have that probable cause to do so. Before the officers can make contact, they observe Garza, Wasson, and Smith return to Garza's Kia, and this is where Wasson retrieves items from the passenger side of the vehicle, which is where the Glock had been observed. So he puts something in his waistband and then takes a backpack from the Kia and walks away. The next part is pivotal to the events that are going to occur. BPD officers contact the three subjects. Garza and Smith both cooperate. However, Wasson ignored commands from multiple officers to stop, began moving away, looked over his shoulder towards one of the police officers as he reaches for his waistband, where he was known to have put something after going to the car, which is where the Glock was. As this happens, a Boise Police Department officer yells at him, "Don't do it. Don't go for the gun," and obviously tells him to stop. Wasson then flees on foot. Two Boise Police Department officers pursue him on foot. As he ran, Wasson takes the gun, so the Glock, from his waistband. One of the officers radios, "We've got one running with a gun," and the officers continue to give multiple commands. One of the commands is "Stop or you'll be shot." So he runs by a civilian standing on the sidewalk who had to quickly move out of the way. I mean, a guy's running next past him with a gun. And at this time, he's going towards Main Street, where several bars had closed. People are exiting. And, this is where the officer-involved shooting occurs. While he's about to round a corner towards a busy street, Officer Feldner discharges 4 rounds from his Glock, striking Wasson in the head. So Wasson goes to the ground, starts bleeding out. Officers move in, they secure the scene, and begin medical on Mr. Wasson. They also kicked his Glock away as well, which was on the ground after he got shot. At this time, I'm going to play the body cam footage. It has been somewhat blurred, not by me, but by whoever provided it to police activity, which is where I got the clip from. Due to the graphic nature of the footage, viewer discretion is advised. I mean, like I said, there was, blurred, on his body, but there is still blood and someone still gets shot in the head. So, just for that warning as well.
Get your hands out of your pocket right fucking now. Don't fucking reach. Don't fucking reach. Drop it. Drop the fucking gun. Drop it. You're gonna get fucking shot.
Alright, so that's from Officer Feldner's body cam. Now I'm going to play the full video, which shows Officer Feldner, as well as the second officer on scene as well.
Hey, bro, get your hands out of your pocket right fucking now. Don't fucking reach. Don't fucking reach. Drop it. Drop the fucking gun. Drop it. You're gonna get fucking shot. You got a gun right here, gun right here. Leave it.
Don't touch it. Don't touch it. Just get on top of it.
Okay, we good? Anybody else? We got one more suspect up in the corner of 5th and Idaho. Roll them over, fucking cold cuff them. Roll them over. Stop it. Hey, get us medics, code 3 right now. Cuff them up. Slow it down, slow it down. Hey, don't move. Police, don't move. Don't move. Right fucking now. We got one running with a gun. We got a man running with a gun. Drop the gun. Drop the gun. Shots fired. Shots fired.
Alrighty, so as the video shows, the suspect was fleeing from officers when the officer-involved shooting occurred. So let's go ahead and take a look at the Boise Police Department policy regarding use of force and see if this shooting was within policy. The use of firearms in the line of duty per Boise Police Department policy states the following. An officer shall be authorized to discharge firearms in the line of duty under the following conditions. To use their firearm to protect themselves or others from what they reasonably believe to be an imminent danger or death or serious bodily injury. To use their firearm to effect the capture or prevent the escape of a felony suspect whose freedom is reasonably believed to represent a significant threat of serious bodily injury or death to the officer and or other persons. During firearms training sessions as directed by firearms instructors, and to shoot an animal as outlined in the treatment of animals policy. The suspect was also actively fleeing and was shot in the back, but there is a state that can help with that. I present to you the state of whiskey. Well, somewhat. So Tennessee is obviously a state, but it's also the key hallmark of a Supreme Court case that happened in 1985. Well, was argued originally in 1984, but decided in 1985, and that is called Tennessee v. Garner. Tennessee v. Garner states the following holding. Law enforcement officers pursuing an unarmed suspect may use deadly force to prevent escape only if the officer has probable cause to believe the suspect poses a significant threat of death or serious physical injury to the officer and or others. So back to Boise we go. In this case, with Mr. Wasson, he was known to be armed. So Tennessee v. Garner, yes, it could be used, shooting, fleeing suspects. But in this case, Tennessee v. Garner states unarmed suspects. Well, in the case of Mr. Wasson, he was known and observed pulling a Glock from his waistband and running down a public sidewalk at 1 a.m. on a Saturday, right after a Friday night where people were out drinking. Bars were actually closing and were actually letting out at the time of this incident. So there were bars closing and people were being moved outside so they could close. So Mr. Wasson at any point could have shot the bystander who the officers ran past. I mean, he could have easily taken a hostage, shot someone. It could have been a lot worse if Mr. Wasson had this evil mentality of, I'm going to use this gun to cause harm. Now, being a police officer, you don't have the luxury of knowing what Mr. Wasson's thinking. He could either be thinking, hey, I got this gun on me, I'm going to run from these cops. But he could also be thinking, I don't want to go to jail, so what if I take a hostage or something? Well, the officers, have to assume the very worst. It's 2024. There's mass shootings in the United States. There have been shootings at clubs on streets similar to this. There was one in Ohio a couple years back. So the officers have to assume the absolute worst could happen. So the officer feared that Mr. Wasson, continuing towards entertainment districts that were letting out with people, could have done harm with the gun he had. So the officer had to make a judgment call. And that judgment call was to discharge his service weapon to stop a threat. All right, so what happens next? Well, shots have been fired. BPD's on scene. Investigation immediately begins on why was someone shot while running away from law enforcement. So they obviously get the evidence, talk to witnesses, talk to officers. You do the whole spiel. Now, this incident was presented to the Gooding County Prosecuting Attorney's Office, which we'll actually get to next. So following the report and the investigation that was conducted, the incident was then handed over to the Gooding County Prosecuting Attorney, who would then determine if any charges or any punishment will be given to the officer. And here's what the prosecuting attorney's conclusion was. After reading the reports, conferring with the detectives who headed up the CITF investigation, reviewing the evidence of this incident, and considering all of the relevant information, including the facts related above, I have concluded that there is insufficient evidence to support a criminal charge against any of the law enforcement officers involved in this incident for the shooting death of Peyton Wasson. The facts in this case reveal that Wasson was fleeing from a suspected drug deal, grabbed towards a gun in his waistband as officers confronted him, fled from the police, drew a gun as he ran, and refused lawful orders to stop and to drop his gun, and was running towards a crowded area when a BPD officer fired at him. Idaho Code 18-4009 makes homicide justifiable by any person when resisting any attempt to commit a felony or when necessarily committed in attempting by lawful ways and means to apprehend any person for a felony committed or in lawfully keeping and preserving the peace. Idaho State Code 18-4011 states homicide is justifiable when committed by public officers when reasonably necessary in order to prevent the escape of any person charged with or suspected of having committed a felony, provided the officer has probable cause to believe that the person suspected or charged with the commission of a felony poses a threat of death or serious bodily injury to the officer or other persons. Idaho Code 19-202A repeats the long-standing Idaho law that in any prosecution for the unlawful use of force, including deadly force, or the attempted or threatened use of force, the burden is on the prosecution to prove beyond a reasonable doubt that the use of force, attempted use of force, or the threat to use force was not justifiable. The following information was known to the BPD officer before he discharged his weapon. The following: Wasson was armed with a firearm in his waistband. Wasson sized up on another BPD officer while reaching for the gun in his waistband and was ordered to stop and drop the gun. Wasson fled and drew the gun from his waistband as he ran. Wasson continued to run down a public street with a gun drawn. There were witnesses and civilians on the street and one directly in the path of Wasson's flight. Wasson was running towards an area where patrons were exiting bars at a closing time. The way Wasson was running and how he was holding the gun was posed as an immediate threat. Based on the foregoing, the officer had cause to believe that Wasson, through his unlawful and potentially violent acts, was continuing and an immediate danger to law enforcement officers who were engaged in the lawful performance of their duties, and was also a danger to the public at large as he fled armed down a public street. Given Idaho codes 18-4009, 18-40111, and 19-202A, all the facts in this case, and what the officer knew when he fired on Wasson, there does not exist sufficient evidence to prove beyond a reasonable doubt the officer committed a crime under Idaho code. Sincerely, Trevor Missildine, Gooding County Prosecutor's Office. So following the investigation, this shooting was ruled as justified by the, prosecuting attorney, and the shooting would have been within departmental policy. I didn't realize the video would be this long. However, I know a lot of times these officer-involved shootings happen. You don't really hear much about the legal process and the full, legal ramifications that go into justifying a use of force incident. So I figured I would just provide the necessary information, and, once you hear all of that you can determine yourself if it was the right call or the wrong call. Again, thank you for watching this video, and have a good rest of your day.